Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Okay, let's start with the scenario. Imagine this. You're watching a show, a big one. The kind of prestige television everyone is talking about.
Right.
And a character, they're under a lot of pressure, and they take a pill to cope with the stress of it all. It's presented as just a normal thing to do.
But that's where the story begins, really, because that fictional moment, that one scene, didn't just say on the screen, it immediately jumped into the real world.
And it translated into millions of people in real time going straight to Google and searching for that exact prescription drug. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating, and I have to say, pretty alarming piece of research out of UC San Diego. They didn't just observe this, they measured it.
They absolutely did. They tracked search data during the third season of the show, The White Lotus, and what they found was, it was a massive surge in public interest for a specific anti-anxiety drug, Lorazepam.
And it goes beyond just curiosity, which is the critical part. They found a shocking increase in searches for how to actually get it online without a doctor.
Exactly. And our sources for this, the primary research letter from the JAMA Health Forum and some health news analysis, they give us the hard data. So our goal today is to really unpack this clear link between what we watch for entertainment and how we behave in the real world when it comes to our health.
So our mission is to break down the study itself, look at how this high-risk medication was portrayed on screen, and then talk about what these numbers, we're talking 1.6 million extra searches, what that means for, media companies, search engines, and for you, the person watching at home.
Because this really does raise some urgent questions about safety, about misuse, and ultimately about responsibility in this digital age where fiction can become a public health issue almost overnight.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It all started with the show, The White Lotus, which is known for looking at, anxiety and wealth and all the complicated stuff that comes with it.
Right. And in the third season, there was a character, Victoria Ratliff, who really became the focal point for this entire phenomenon.
And her struggle was something a lot of viewers could probably relate to.
Oh, absolutely. She was dealing with intense social anxiety, insomnia, things many people face. And the show gave her a solution. The prescription anti-anxiety medication, Lorazepam, that was her coping mechanism.
And the way they showed her using it was, let's just say it was problematic from the very beginning, wasn't it?
It was deeply problematic. It wasn't framed as, a careful, clinically supervised treatment. It was portrayed as incredibly casual.
Like just another tool to get through the day.
Almost like a luxury good, a way to just take the edge off. But Lorazepam is a very powerful drug. It's a potent benzodiazepine.
Oh.
And what we saw was Victoria taking it often, whenever she felt stressed, and almost always with a glass of white wine.
And the show made a point of showing the immediate effects of that combination. The slurring words, falling asleep at dinner.
Yes, visible impairment. But those consequences were framed as sort of dramatic or maybe even slightly comedic plot points. The incredible danger of mixing two central nervous system depressants like that was just normalized.
It was basically presented as this magic switch to turn off anxiety.
That's a great way to put it, a shut-off switch. And the only real downside shown was a little social embarrassment. But then the narrative took it a step further, escalating from this casual misuse into a story about dependence.
How do they do that?
Well, Victoria offers the Lorazepam to her husband, Timothy, which right there is a huge red flag. Sharing controlled substances is not just dangerous, it's illegal.
And he was going through his own crisis.
A huge financial crisis. So he starts taking it, and eventually he's stealing her pills to self-medicate his own stress. He develops this clear pattern of dependence, and he also starts mixing the pills with alcohol, just like his wife.
So the show connected the drug use, not just to, high society anxiety, but to these really common universal stressors like money problems and marriage trouble.
And that's a connection the viewer makes, perhaps without even realizing it. You see these complex, relatable problems, and the solution being presented on screen is this little pill.
So before we get to the actual numbers from the study, can you explain a bit more about the drug itself? Why is Lorazepam considered so high risk? Why is it only meant for short-term use?
Of course. Lorazepam, which many people might know by its brand name, Ativan, is a benzodiazepine. It works by boosting the effect of a neurotransmitter in your brain called GABA.
And GABA is what calms the brain down.
GABA is your brain's main brake pedal. It's an inhibitory chemical. So when you take a benzodiazepine, you're essentially slamming on the brakes of your central nervous system. That's why it's so effective for something like an acute panic attack.
So it's a very powerful tool, but that power comes with a price if you use it too often.
A very significant price. Clinicians are incredibly strict about prescribing it only for the short term, maybe a few weeks at most. And the reason is twofold: tolerance and physical dependence.
Your body just gets used to it.
Your body is incredibly adaptive. If you keep hitting the brakes chemically, your brain starts to compensate. It reduces the number of brake receptors. That's tolerance. You need more of the drug to get the same effect.
And then comes dependence.
Then comes physical dependence. Your brain chemistry actually changes to the point where it can't function normally without the drug.
And if you're dependent and you suddenly stop,
the withdrawal is severe and dangerous. Your brain, which has been suppressed, rebounds into a state of hyperexcitability. We're talking intense anxiety, panic attacks, agitation, even seizures. The show, by making the characters' use seem so casual and continuous, completely ignored this dark, inevitable part of the cycle.
Which is especially concerning when you look at the baseline rates of misuse for these drugs.
It is. The study itself cited data showing that nearly 1 out of every 5 people prescribed benzodiazepines ends up misusing them. So when a cultural force like the White Lotus essentially runs a 2-month-long ad for casual misuse, it's pouring gasoline on an already burning fire.
The lead author of the study, Kevin Yang, he basically said the show emphasized the benefits, the immediate anxiety relief, but completely left out the severe risks.
Exactly. It told a dangerously incomplete story. And that incomplete story is what set the stage for this fascinating piece of research. So with all that clinical context, the research team asked a very specific, very quantifiable question.
Which was?
Was the release and the run of The White Lotus Season 3, starting on February 16, 2025, associated with an increase in public interest in Lorazepam? An increase that went above and beyond the normal, expected trends.
And what I love about this study is that they didn't just, look at Twitter or do a survey. They used a really sophisticated statistical method to try and prove causation.
They did. Their methodology was what we call a quasi-experimental design. They used anonymous aggregated search data from Google in the US.
And they looked at a really long period of time, right?
A very long period, from the beginning of January 2022 all the way through June of 2025. That long baseline, that 2.5-year period before the show, is so important. It lets them see the normal rhythm of searches.
So that data from 2022 and 2023, that's their control reality in a sense. It's what things looked like before the show came along.
Precisely. And the core challenge is figuring out what the search volume should have been in 2025 if the show had never existed. To do that, they used a very specific statistical tool.
An autoregressive integrated moving average model.
Or ARIMA, yes. It sounds incredibly technical.
Can you break that down for us? What does that model actually do?
Think of it this way. Search data has patterns. It's not random. Searches for anxiety medication might go up every winter, for example, or dip around holidays.
Okay.
The ARIMA model is designed to learn those historical patterns, the seasonality, any long-term trends, the weekly cycles, and use all of that information to create a very accurate forecast. It predicts what the search volume for Lorazepam would have been week by week if nothing new had happened.
So they created a ghost timeline. A timeline where the White Lotus never aired.
Exactly. That's the counterfactual. So you have the observed rate, what actually happened, and the expected rate from the ghost timeline. The difference between those two is the effect of the show. It isolates its influence from all the other background noise.
But they didn't stop there. To really make sure it wasn't just, say, a general spike in anxiety across the country, they added a control group.
And this was the masterstroke, methodologically. They compared the searches for Lorazepam against 2 other very common benzodiazepines, Alprazolam, that's Xanax, and clonazepam, which is Klonopin.
And these drugs are very similar to Lorazepam.
Chemically similar, they treat similar conditions, they're under the same regulations, but, and this is the most important part, they were not mentioned in the show at all.
So if all 3 had spiked, it might have been something else. But if only Lorazepam spiked,
then you can be very confident that the show was the trigger. Those control drugs are what make this study's conclusion so powerful and so difficult to refute.
Okay, now let's get to what I think is the most concerning part of their method. How they measured people trying to get the drug.
This is what takes the study from just being an interesting academic finding to a real public health warning. They didn't just look at general searches like, what is Lorazepam? They created a special composite search query to find people who were actively trying to buy it online.
What kind of terms were they looking for?
They searched for the drug's name combined with action words, so things like Lorazepam online, order Lorazepam, buy Lorazepam, get Lorazepam, and even shop Lorazepam.
So there's a huge difference between someone searching for Lorazepam side effects versus buy Lorazepam online. One is information seeking, the other is intent to acquire.
A clear intent to bypass the entire medical system, and that's a powerful indicator of potential misuse. Tracking that specific intent, given how dangerous these drugs can be, was absolutely paramount.
All right, so we've got the method down. Let's get to the numbers, because this is where the raw power of a TV show really becomes clear.
The data paints a very, very clear picture. The researchers found that after the show premiered, weekly search rates for Lorazepam shot up and stayed elevated for 12 straight weeks.
12 weeks. So it wasn't just a one-day blip. It was a sustained effect that lasted for the entire run of the season.
A sustained effect, yes. And the size of that increase is, well, it's stunning. During that 12-week period, general searches for Lorazepam were cumulatively 98.6% higher than what the model expected.
Wait, 98.6%? That's almost double.
Almost double the search traffic they would have predicted based on years of stable data. It's a massive deviation from the norm.
So what does that percentage mean in terms of actual people searching? What's the raw number?
The researchers calculated that it represented approximately 1.6 million additional searches for Lorazepam in the U.S. in just those 3 months.
1.6 million. That's a city's worth of people.
Yeah.
All driven to their search bar by one fictional character.
It's an incredible number. And the control drugs, the ones not on the show, they confirm the cause.
What did the data look like?
Almost perfectly flat. Searches for Alprazolam were only up by a tiny 1.4% and clonazepam by just 0.7%. Statistically, that's just noise. It proves, beyond any reasonable doubt, that the spike was exclusively about the drug featured in the White Lotus.
Okay, so 1.6 million people were curious. That's one thing. But what about the acquisition data? The people looking to buy it?
And that, as you said before, is the most alarming finding. Those searches, the ones with terms like buy and order, also spiked dramatically.
How much?
Those acquisition-focused queries were cumulatively 63.6% higher than expected over the same 12-week period.
63%. So in terms of actual searches, how many does that translate to?
It translates to about 30,000 additional searches where people were explicitly looking for ways to purchase or obtain Lorazepam online.
30,000. That's a significant number of people actively trying to get a controlled substance through what are likely unregulated illegal channels.
It's a huge number. And as the authors noted, it shows how entertainment can not just reflect, but actively drive human behavior. That jump in acquisition searches suggests that for a subset of the audience, the show wasn't just entertainment, it was a recommendation they decided to act on.
So let's talk about the real-world impact of that. We have these huge numbers, but the deep dive is connecting them back to the clinical danger, right?
Right. The fact that 1.6 million people started their search journey after seeing this very biased, incomplete portrayal on TV is a problem in itself. They're starting from a place of misinformation.
Let's go back to the biggest risk the show seemed to normalize.
Yeah.
Mixing Lorazepam with alcohol. You said it wasn't just additive, it was synergistic. Can you explain that in more detail?
I can. As we said, Lorazepam works on the GABA system, your brain's brakes. Alcohol is also a central nervous system depressant that works heavily through that same GABA system.
So you're hitting the same target with two different weapons.
Exactly, and they amplify each other. It's not a 1 + 1 = 2 effect, it's more like 1 + 1 = 4 or even 5. And this synergy dramatically increases the risk of something called respiratory depression.
Which is when your breathing slows down.
Slows down to a dangerous rate or even stops completely. The part of your brain that controls automatic functions like breathing just gets too suppressed. This is a primary cause of overdose deaths involving benzodiazepines, and yet the show portrayed the combination over and over again as if the worst that could happen is you nod off at the dinner table.
And beyond the immediate risk of overdose, what about the dependency the show glossed over? The characters used it for a long time.
Right, and the show depicted Timothy stealing pills, which shows a loss of control, a hallmark of dependence. But the clinical story they completely missed was the withdrawal. If those characters had tried to stop suddenly,
What would have happened to them in reality?
a sudden stop after long-term use would trigger that rebound effect we talked about. Their brains would go into overdrive. Severe insomnia, confusion, hallucinations, and a very real risk of life-threatening seizures. The show gave you the easy way in, but it completely hid the terrifying and dangerous path out.
And this is all happening against a backdrop of a public health system that's already struggling with these issues.
Yes, that's a critical piece of context. The This isn't happening in a vacuum. Benzodiazepine prescriptions are already on the rise. And more importantly, the internet is flooded with illegitimate online pharmacies that sell these drugs without a prescription.
So the 30,000 acquisition searches, that's the demand side of that black market.
The show essentially created a surge in demand that flows directly to these dangerous, unregulated sellers. Even if just a small fraction of those 30,000 searches led to a successful purchase, that represents a real, tangible public health harm.
It also must create a new problem for doctors in their clinics.
A huge problem. A clinician now has to wonder if a patient's request for a specific drug is based on genuine clinical need or because they saw it on a popular TV show. The doctor then has to spend time deprogramming the misinformation before they can even begin a proper assessment. The show has, in effect, made the process of informed consent much more difficult for a huge number of people.
Now, we should be clear. The researchers were very upfront about the limitations of their study.
Absolutely, which is the sign of good research. The main limitation is that they were looking at search data.
Right. So this study shows us information seeking. It shows us intent. But it can't tell us for sure if people actually bought or took the medication.
Exactly. We can't make that final leap from the data. We can't say, the White Lotus directly caused X number of people to start using Lorazepam. The data trail ends at the search bar.
But that doesn't mean the findings aren't serious.
Not at all. Because measuring intent, especially the intent to acquire a drug illicitly, is still incredibly important. The fact that 30,000 extra searches happened for buy Lorazepam online confirms that the show actively pushed a measurable number of viewers into a high-risk pathway. That intent is itself a critical public health warning.
It shows the show moved people towards danger.
It does. And the case for causality is made so much stronger by the specificity of the effect. Remember the control drugs?
Alprazolam and clonazepam.
Their search rates didn't budge. If this was just about general anxiety in the world, you'd expect to see all of them rise together. The fact that the spike was exclusively surgically precise to Lorazepam, the one drug named in the show, makes the connection almost undeniable.
It's the smoking gun, really.
It really is. It serves as this powerful warning shot. Even if only a tiny percentage of those acquisition searches ended in a purchase, that's still a preventable harm that can be traced directly back to a piece of entertainment.
So the study didn't just diagnose the problem. The researchers also proposed some solutions, some clear calls to action. Let's start with the entertainment industry itself.
Right. Their first recommendation is aimed squarely at show producers. They argue that creators need to acknowledge this public health impact. It's no longer theoretical, it's quantified.
And their suggestion is to develop best practices for how they depict prescription drugs.
Exactly. Especially for controlled substances like benzodiazepines. And what that would look like, practically, is maybe including informational warnings, disclaimers.
Like the ones we see for violence or language?
Precisely. A simple text card at the beginning or end of an episode, something like, Lorazepam carries a high risk of dependence and respiratory depression, particularly when combined with alcohol. Please consult a healthcare professional.
That seems like a very reasonable step. It provides the crucial context that the drama leaves out. It's a counter-narrative.
It is. It arms the viewer with the truth before they head to the search bar.
Okay, the second recommendation was for the search engines. Google, Bing, and the others.
Yes. Recommendation 2 is all about optimizing search results for health information. The researchers say that when a user types in a high-risk query,
like buy Lorazepam online,
that specific search should trigger an intervention. Instead of just showing a list of links that might include illegal pharmacies, the search engine should immediately and prominently display a health information panel, an info box.
And that box would have what? Accurate information?
Accurate, evidence-based information on the risks, the dangers of dependence, and this is key links to legitimate mental health resources and substance use support services.
So you're using that moment of dangerous intent as an opportunity to redirect the person toward actual help.
You're using the platform responsibly to mitigate the harm that another platform may have caused. The search engines are the gatekeepers at that critical moment.
And finally, the third recommendation is for the viewer, for you, the listener.
And this is the most practical takeaway. The advice is to approach any portrayal of medication in media with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Assume you're not getting the full story.
You have to. You have to recognize that an entertainment narrative is, by its nature, only showing you one side of the coin, the part that serves the plot. It structurally ignores the long-term consequences because, frankly, withdrawal and recovery aren't always great television.
So the bottom line is, You have to separate entertainment from medical advice.
Completely. Your health decisions, especially about powerful medications, should only ever be made in conversation with a real doctor who can assess your actual clinical need and give you the full, unvarnished risk profile. Your doctor isn't writing a script. They are managing your health. So when we zoom out, this deep dive shows us something really powerful and I think a little unsettling about the world we live in. We saw how a single character in a fictional TV show led to 1.6 million extra searches for a high-risk drug.
Including tens of thousands of searches from people actively trying to get it without a prescription. It's a stark reminder of the immediate, measurable power that art has on our real-world health behaviors.
It really puts the responsibility on creators and on the digital platforms that distribute their work to think about the consequences.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to take away.
If one fictional character and a 12-week storyline can drive millions of searches for one specific anti-anxiety drug, what other behaviors, what other ideas about diet or money or relationships are we subconsciously absorbing and acting on from the thousands of hours of entertainment we consume every year? The influence is real, it is measurable, and being aware of it is the first step toward making more conscious choices.
We hope this knowledge helps you approach both your screen and your search bar with a more critical, more informed perspective. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the data.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.